I wanted to say a good evening to everyone. My name is Dan Liu, and I'm the president of the now consolidated American Marketing Association Connecticut chapter. And we've always talked about at our events, our goal is to ensure that our guests walk away with something of value. And I think tonight's virtual event will be no exception. If you have not thought of that in the past and you'd like to be involved with the AMA in Connecticut, please consider joining as a member, volunteering with us, or perhaps even becoming part of the board. For tonight, I'd like to thank our many sponsors for supporting tonight's webinar. We've got Media Associates, a highly respected independent media planning, buying, and analytics agency. Sacred Heart University's Jack Welch College of Business and Technology, which supports 9 different graduate degree programs. Alpha Graphics Stanford, a one-stop shop for all your print, graphics, and signage needs. And Sales Intel, a firm that provides extensive contact data and company insights to help accelerate efficient growth. So at this time, I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Ben Kunz, who's the EVP of Strategy at Media Associates, and he'll tell you a little bit more about tonight's topic and introduce our illustrious panelists. Ben?
All right, thank you, Dan. Welcome, everyone. We're excited here tonight to talk about the rise of generative artificial intelligence and how marketers can actually start using it today. This is an exciting panel. We have 3 really amazing gurus here who are actually using these tools today. I want to introduce you to our lineup. I'm Ben Kunz. I'm EVP of Strategy at Media Associates, a media planning, buying, and analytics agency. First up, we have Isabella Bedoya. Izzy is a AI-powered marketing strategy person who has actually not only used tools like ChatGPT, but she's helped develop some of the technology behind them. She works with large language models, machine learning, and prompt engineering. So Izzy, say hello and tell us a quick bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here. Yeah, I have a lot of experience with marketing. I used to do a lot of marketing campaigns for Fortune 500 brands, and then I moved into more prompt engineering and the whole world of AI and generative AI. So we'll get into that, but I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm excited for this conversation. Thanks, Ben.
You got it. And next up, we have Elisabeth Michaud, who is a lead of product marketing at Highspot. Highspot is a sales productivity platform that helps teams with the content training, coaching, and insights. And she has been delving into AI. Elisabeth, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Ben mentioned, I work at a company called Highspot, and it is a sales enablement platform. And I've had the really cool experience of getting to use AI as a marketer and starting to take advantage of some of this new innovation. But the other thing that's been really fun for me is because I lead product marketing, my team is accountable for launching new features and capabilities of our products. So we've actually had a chance to launch some new generative AI features in our product, and going through that and developing the messaging around it has been a really fun experience over the past few months. So I'm getting kind of that dual purpose there. And I would say, most of my expertise comes from the world of B2B software as a service platforms. So I'm coming from that angle, a lot of sales-led companies.
Thank you, Elisabeth. And last but certainly not least is my good friend and partner, Lee Baler. Lee is Global Strategy Lead for Strike Social, a technology leader in YouTube, TikTok, and other paid social platforms. We've had the good fortune to partner with Strike on several campaigns. They are amazing at using AI and other technology to optimize digital performance. Lee, say hello.
Hello, thanks, Ben. So the way I define my company, Strike, we're an activation team. So unlike what Ben does, who does end-to-end, we only get involved on the paid side, so setup, management, analytics. My team is mainly in 6 cities: Chicago, Mexico City, Manila, Philippines, Krakow, Poland, Thailand. For us, we're using AI really to help templatize the landscape and be able just to have consistency on insights and how you're doing data and content.
So let's dive in. Let's take a deep breath, and we're going to talk a little bit about the robots that are coming for us, but more important, how can we partner with them and use them to improve our jobs and roles in marketing? So before we begin, everyone think back to Thanksgiving not so long ago, right before Christmas, the holidays. You had your turkey. A few days later, this thing launched called ChatGPT. ChatGPT was a chat type thing. No one knew what it was. And within 2 months, it had scaled to 100 million users. It was the fastest adoption of technology in human history. Kevin Kelly, the co-founder of Wired Magazine, spoke this spring at South by Southwest Interactive, and he likened what's going on today with generative AI tools like ChatGPT to the invention of HMTL. E.g., the internet was around for many decades prior to the 1990s, but it was very, very hard to use. And suddenly, when web pages were something anyone could put up, the web and the internet exploded and turned into all sorts of use cases. Well, AI has kind of gone through the same evolution. It's been around here for decades, since Alan Turing was cracking codes in World War II. But suddenly, it's easy to use. The user experience where anyone can jump into these tools and play with them and do things with them is here. So I want to start with the first question to our panelists, and I'll turn it to, I guess, Elisabeth. What's everyone so excited for right now? Why is AI in the news constantly, and what are you hearing that feels different to you this time?
Yeah, I think the main thing that feels different, you sort of alluded to it by saying, it's easy to use. AI has been around for a while. We've seen AI, coming to life in various ways in the tech that we use every day, and the business tech that, we use at work every day. But right now, it's very fast. It's very easy to take advantage of this generative AI technology and for companies to be building on top of it. So it used to take, a lot of deep experts, super technical people to kind of harness the power of AI. And now the folks like, me, that I don't have a deeply technical background, I'm, a product marketer, and I'm able to use the power of AI in my day-to-day work, beyond just, maybe Siri telling me that, my next appointment is coming up in 20 minutes. So that pace of adoption and the pace of innovation on top of this feature set seems like it's way beyond, what it ever has been. It just feels like a real turning point for the technology.
Now, Izzy, I know you've done a lot of work with large language models and some of the infrastructure behind this. What is your take on the evolution and launch? What's going on under the hood that makes this feel different this time?
So the biggest difference, as Elisabeth was saying, is that you're actually able to anyone really, as long as you know how to speak a language, you're able to communicate with these types of technologies. So that's why it's called natural language processing, because you can actually, for us, we're speaking English, so we can actually prompt it, which means, we type in prompts or inputs that we want to generate, and it'll generate something back. This is different than, even just, a year or two ago, where you actually needed to know how to code. Software development industry is changing, and in addition to that, we're seeing a rise in AI tools because there's so many no-code tools, meaning that you don't have to know coding anymore. You can just use these tools, learn how to prompt, which is just learn how to ask your questions or figure out what you wanted to say, and you'll be able to have something developed pretty fast. And ChatGPT can also help you add the components of coding that is needed, if needed at all.
And you're hitting a good point, and I want to elaborate on that with Lee. I think the perception in business was if you used AI in the past, you needed to have a mad scientist on your team who'd be creating it somehow in the corner, bespoke. But we're really plugging into this more like electricity. Lee, can you tell a little bit about what you're seeing and the launch and evolution of it this last year?
Yeah, my CEO, Pat McKenna, talks a lot about the limitations of human capital. And we think about that as a business with 150 people. Just what are those scheduled tasks that a machine can do that a human might be doing now? And you think about those weekly status reports, those things that go out to a client each week that somebody has to download, dig into. How do you, what audience is doing best? What asset is doing best? To be good at insights and supply consist value for a client, you need a few things. You need access to that data. You need to know what's the value in that data. You need plain quantitative language to make sense for a client. What Elisabeth just said about Isabella, it's like there's no coding. You can just do that data dump. You can put that in. This is something, this is a utility that makes sense. And when you think of it that way, it's like, well, here's a pain point for my team to do. It's a time-consuming task that needs to get done, and I just have to get it done. The fact that chat is able to expedite and speed up the time to get more done quickly is why it's being adopted by so many teams that don't need to have expensive human capital on staff.
Well, I think you're alluding to one of the key points. So before we get technical and dive into what's going on, how we can use it, let's share a few stories. I'd like to do a round here and hear from each of you. What has surprised you most about using AI in the past 6 months? Elisabeth, what's been your takeaway that kind of made you go, wow?
Yeah, I would say just one of the biggest surprises for me has been how quickly people are adopting this. So, the first time I heard about it, to your point, I think was maybe December or early January this year. And, a month later, I was seeing companies come out with these new generative AI driven features in their products. I work mostly in the tech space, so I'm, keeping track of that. But like just the pace that was launching and the pace that I've seen some of the teams that I work with internally be able to adopt and harness that power has been absolutely wild. As a product marketer, it's honestly a little bit hard to keep up with, I think. And then I think the thing that's exciting to me really is about how much more accessible it is to me in my day-to-day work. So it's easier, as I said, for like the technical folks to adopt this and build it into the products that they are building. And it's a lot easier for me to leverage kind of these chat-based interfaces and things like that to accomplish the things I need to get done. So it's fast and it's really easy.
A related question, and Izzy, I'll turn this to you. I think the versatility of these tools is what surprises people when they start to use them. I think a lot of people think ChatGPT, for instance, is sort of a high-end chatbot at heart. It mimics human conversations, but I understand it can compose music, it can write business plans, it can write and debug computer code. So Izzy, what use cases have you seen that have surprised you with these new AI tools?
This is a really great question. I mean, the use cases, I continue to get surprised all the time. And actually, I think that if you, like, this is, I think we're going to touch a little bit about this later too, but if you can think of anything that you're currently doing, and that's kind of how I started, right? It was just like every thought that I was having, I was just putting into ChatGPT. It was kind of like, it just became this like diary that I never had, because every thought, every idea, every project, or not even for work, even for personal life, everything that I thought of, I put it on ChatGPT, and like, it would respond. It would always have an answer. One of the most interesting use cases, and it's related to marketing, it was actually the fact that it can actually create an audience persona. And it can do it all the way to like the fears, the pain points, limiting beliefs, frustrations, desires, and it gets really accurate. And once I saw that was like the one that kind of opened up my brain to say, what, this is actually a very useful tool. And once I experienced that aha moment, then it just became this whole a thing of like diving in deeper. And I think everybody has to go through that aha moment to kind of become obsessed with it. But there's a lot of tools, even if you have a to-do list, you can type in your to-do list into ChatGPT. You could ask for it to like prioritize it. You can ask for it to do it like based on like, the 4 quadrants or whatever method. Anything that you have going on, it can do. So I think
So
what's
Izzy, I want to
yeah.
follow up because I think you just gave every market researcher in our audience a little heart palpitation there. Let's talk about personas. How do you do that? Do you upload data into it and ask it prompts and it just comes back? Like, what is your process to build a marketing persona?
No, actually you can just prompt it if you'd like. I can actually share my screen and show you if there's time. I don't know if there's time, but it's basically you just say this is how you would write a prompt. You would say like the role, so like act as a digital marketer, for example, create an audience persona, include the fears, pain points, desires, buying behaviors, all of that. And then you just say, for context, I sell X, Y, and Z, and that's it. And then you can, if you want, you can give it like a format output of like, answer it in bullet points or whatever it is. But it's really that simple.
Well, that's great. You just saved us about a day of work tomorrow, so thank you for that. Lee, let me hear from you. What is your biggest surprise using these new tools? What's made you go, wow?
We don't use pivot tables as much. I'm putting all of the data into chat. Chat is then giving us synopsises, and then we were asking it to then call out those insights, and those things that would be time consuming, I'm finding we are able to get to fast and easily identifiable. I never really thought of ChatGPT. You talk about it like being able to do content, and you mentioned music, but it's taking the place of how we use Excel. And that to me is a fascinating one, because those are just like big wonky Excel files downloading a lot of data. Using chat for those is and absolutely fascinating for me to see data come to life that way.
Now we're jumping ahead a little bit. I want to follow up on that. So I'm envisioning this massive data table, and you're looking for patterns, and you're trying to optimize to call campaign performance. But it's only an AI that's going to respond to how you prompt it, right? So how do you query it in a way where you're going to get insights out of it? Is that hard to figure out? Did that take a little bit of time?
That's the thing that takes the most time. So one of the things that we had to do, and I'm a lot newer at this than Izzy is a guy in my team sat down, and we, over the last 90 days or so, developed about 250 prompts of what we wanted to feed in. And then we templatize what the data table so that people can download those. And then you just have the data. Here's the prompts that we want for an acquisition campaign, an engagement campaign, and you want to know what audience and asset is doing best so teams can pull those. And you just begin finding, asking like a data scientist would say, tell me about, this way using this data. And that piece of being able to build prompts is going to be vital to teams that want to get into ChatGPT and AI, because you have to be consistent as to what you feed in. The data has to be consistent. The ask has to be consistent.
Well, we're going to come back to that. And I love where each of you has gone. But before we do, let's take one step back. Let's, for people that are a little bit new to this, for generative AI, let's talk about what makes this new AI work. What is going on under the hood when we engage with these platforms. Izzy, why don't you lead off on this one?
So in regards to like ChatGPT, for example. So I mean that's pretty much it, right? It's like being able to know how to prompt it, because like essentially what's going on under the hood, there's two versions of ChatGPT 3. ChatGPT, there's 3.5 and there's 4. 3.5 is a free version, the one that everyone has access to. For context, I think it was trained around 175 billion data sets, if I'm not mistaken. And in comparison, ChatGPT 4 was trained on 100 trillion. So that is like a massive difference. And ChatGPT 4 is like, I think it's like $20 or $21 a month. It's not really like crazy expensive, but it will give you higher level outputs. And if you're just using like, 3.5, that's fine for like your day-to-day. But 4, this is where you actually want to call in 4 to use it for like for work or for very specific things. And it also has web browsing capabilities, and you can access you can also use plugins And the plugins, you know, that's a whole other ballpark. But essentially, it's just a matter of choosing which platform. Then there's also like Bard by Google. They're still in development. It's not as good as ChatGPT. But it's all the best way to learn how to use these tools is by learning how to prompt it. And prompt engineering also, fun fact, it makes you super valuable in the workplace too.
So I want to push on that because there are kind of two layers that we were talking about. Under ChatGPT, there's this huge amount of data that it's this large language model that it's learned from to be able to answer questions. But the flip side is there's this proliferation. I was reading up earlier, there were 80,000 AI patents in this year alone. And if you think about what's pouring into the market, the forecasts are that by 3 years out, this is going to be a $98 billion industry. And to put that big number in context, that's equal to 1/6 of all global software sales. So this thing that just barely came out of the gate 6 months ago is going to soon be equal to $1 out of $6 spent on software everywhere. And I think where marketers are confused, here's my question, and Lee, I'll come to you with this one, is how do you sort through the tools in the first place? You've got ChatGPT and Bard and image creators like Midjourney. How do you keep abreast with the right tools to use in your toolkit?
Agencies, companies tend to overinvest in tech and SaaS and then not use them. We're going with the options that we have until we find that it's like, oh, this doesn't do X. What's the thing that we need to pay on? And we really attempt to identify how many access and seats do we need? Does it link to my Google Sheets? Is it easily modified and accessible? Can we feed that into the other tools that we use? So we did attempt to use the Google tool as well, but we found that the limitations of it as of now is not suitable for us. So we do use the chat and some of the plugins that we've paid on. And until we hit a point that we can't do most of the things we want to do, I haven't found a need of expanding beyond that toolkit. I think as we begin feeding more into clients, data visualization tools and stuff, we'll need to build upon what we know.
And Elisabeth, anything you'd like to add about sort of the inputs? Does anything surprise to you? I know there's a lot of talk about accuracy, hallucinations, getting bad outputs. Have you had any experience with wondering what's going on under the hood?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that folks that I've been working with are doing is really cautioning against taking everything that the AI spits out at face value. So, you know, it's looking at a huge data set and that makes a lot of it quite accurate, the things that it will spit out, but it doesn't have a built-in fact checker. It can't necessarily tell you, you know, if this one source is more reliable than another source, other than, you know, some of the basic signals around those things. And so I don't see it as the like end-to-end content creator, for example, or the end-to-end, you know, creator of any use case that you might have for it. It is kind of the way to start that process, and it's really helpful, but you still need a fact checker, you still need an editor, you still need someone who's putting that human layer of like, you know, sort of checking basically to make sure that, you know, it is accurate. So that's definitely, you know, a risk that has been happening. I think there was a question about that in the chat as well. So yeah, it's definitely, I wouldn't just copy something out of ChatGPT and put it on my website and think that it's fact, but I would, you know, use it to kind of start giving me ideas or start giving me some concepts to work with.
It's funny, my son came up to me the other day and said, "Hey Dad, your bio's in ChatGPT." So I looked at what it spit out and it said, "Ben Coons is an executive at Media Associates who writes columns for Forbes." And I've written columns for Ad Age and Business Week and Bloomberg. I've never been published in Forbes in my entire life. So what I've heard is it can be declaratively wrong and you have to watch that.
Yeah.
By the way, to
Very
the audience,
confidently wrong.
as we progress, audience, feel free to submit questions, and we'll try to get to them as we go. Here's one that came up. And Lee, it came from Patricia. She wanted to know any concerns about adding proprietary data into a platform like ChatGPT. How do you respond?
I wish I wasn't so callous about it. No, not at this time, although I should obviously be cognizant that it's a single tenant solution, meaning that like somebody else couldn't go in and then use that data, or that my client's data isn't being fed into another model that someone can use. I tend to be pretty judicious about these things, but I should likely have know, what is chat doing with this content?
Well, I think what we're touching on here is a very important arena for marketers to think about, that the old rules of data security, of privacy, of confidentiality, of copyright are up in the air right now. I mean, if you go to one of these image creators and create an image, do you own the image? Can you use the image? Do you credit the image? So it's an interesting arena. If this is basically mashing up the intellectual capital of humanity and giving you a custom mixtape, if you will, do you own it? And so I think it's just an interesting area for exploration. So I want to get into now more the core of our conversation. How are marketers using this? Now, one framework we discussed earlier is there really are sort of three buckets of how marketers can use AI, probably more, but the three that we came up with was research, creation, and optimization. So a lot of what we do in marketing is we're trying to understand what's going on in the market. We've touched on our consumer personas a little bit. So there's a whole research area. We'll come back to the other two, creation and optimization. But Elisabeth, why don't we talk a little bit about how you see this on the research side? What have you used, or what are you hearing that people are doing in marketing to use AI for research?
Yeah, I think one of the like strongest use cases for ChatGPT and some of these other roles is it can synthesize a large amount of information, a large amount of data, a large amount of content, very quickly. And so it's great to use for things like summarizing the longer form content, generate a 3-sentence description of a long, research PDF, for example, for me, or give me the transcript of what was, discussed during a call or a video, and then, kind of being able to interrogate that from there. So the summary, and then also being able to kind of like interrogate the summary or the documents that you've added in there can be really, really helpful. So it can, help you distill down large sets of content and large sets of data quickly. Lee was kind of touching on that earlier a bit.
And a related question, it came up from one of the our participants. I believe ChatGPT's data that ingested is only good through the fall of 2021 or something like that. So are there any risks, as the data is a few years out of date at this point, that we may not get the right answer as well? How do you think about that when you do your research?
That's me. I think it depends a lot on whether you're using the public or the paid version. So for your paid chat, and I think the free versions have the older data sets. The more current versions that are, pay for play are more up to date in terms of their data. But again, it's something that it's great for trends. It isn't as great for tell me the absolute facts of something.
Now, I'll share one angle that we've played with at Media Associates. Part of research sometimes is expanding your hypotheses about what you want to research. And so we were researching a new product division for our own agency recently, and I put a series of prompts in the ChatGPT, and it gave me ideas on angles. It gave me ideas on market niches. It even gave us ideas on brand names and available URLs that we had to verify. And what I found is it's not perfect, but it can kind of expand your thinking. It's almost like having a personal ideation machine And then my job, I found, was to get our team to narrow it down into the real kernel of the right ideas. Izzy, I'd love to hear on the research side, you've been very innovative in this space. How are you using this to research? What are the questions you're trying to tease out?
So for research, I would use this tool called perplexity.ai. I'll put it here in the chat. Perplexity.ai. It did I spell that right? Just making sure. Yeah, so it's a AI powered search engine. So it actually will do accurate research in real time. So for example, you can type in like, top 10 marketing podcast, and it'll show the podcast, and it'll put like a number right next to it. It's a clickable number, and that number or that button, it takes you straight to the website. ChatGPT has been a little bit of, sometimes it'll lie to you, like Elisabeth said, right? Confidently lie to you. It will create random data. And actually there was a court case where a couple of lawyers, they used ChatGPT and they cited like fake sources. It was like all over the news. And ChatGPT had made up that information. So that's actually called AI hallucinations, when it creates this fake information. Not even like the CEO of Google or like those major companies, they call it like, this is like the black box of AI, because they don't even know how it's making up this information. That's like the unknown. That's like the eerie part of it. That's like the unknown of how is it even doing that. So yeah, with ChatGPT 4, if you're gonna do research, I would probably use version 4.
And thank you for that, Lee. I want to talk about the research side with an angle for you about prompts. We've heard a lot about this idea of prompt engineers. It's only as good as how you frame the question that you ask it when you do research. You just mentioned you spend a lot of time figuring out the prompts for your own optimization. When you're doing research, how do you approach creating the prompts to get the right output out of these platforms?
I think the way that you, Ben, would use it, which is audience identification as to the insights of a brand, is a little bit of a deviation as to how I'm using it. I'm looking to cut down on those repeatable tasks that my team is doing so. I have a piece of business. We manage 150 gyms on DMAs, each with a weekly budget. It's a lot of setup. It's a lot of data. I love what my team does. They miss the insights I want them to call out. The language that they use sometimes. One guy says dominate a lot in his analysis. I can't get him to stop saying dominate. Like, men dominated women in this campaign. It's not the best, but I do. The idea is for the prompts is like, well, what are those? What's the asks that we were usually asking? And it's those things of, I'm not looking to come up with a new hit song. I'm looking to find the things that we are usually calling out to clients and then making those consistent in a prompt. And that is, for anyone who hasn't used ChatGPT or an AI tool, which is like, well, what's those things in your life, business or otherwise, you're doing now, even managing a budget? And I would say, like, things that you're asking your kids to do, I would, well, how do I can make prompts for those, see what chat says to you. And that's the way that I began using it, which is like, how do I cut down on time? The prompts I want it so that if someone says, well, the team isn't going to do insights the way you do, and that's the thing I wanted to fix. I wanted it to be the same as if the not the lowest, but the most junior member of my chain was doing it the same way you and I would do an insight.
Well, I appreciate that. I think from my personal experience, I found following influencers or leaders in AI on LinkedIn and is as painful as slogging through some of the silliness. There are some really bright people out there who have cracked the code on prompts, and they are sharing their prompts. So I'd recommend everyone, if you're not doing this, track down people talking about AI on LinkedIn. Find those that are sharing their prompts. And another great resource, there's a platform called Zentask.ai, Zentask. And it's actually a platform that helps you, it builds prompts based on what you're trying to do. So there are a lot of tools out there that almost help you interface with these AI systems. Well, let's get to the fun part. So the second of the three categories is creation. And I'm sure you've all seen the Mid-Journey Discord artwork floating around, people with 6 fingers, although I hear that's getting better. But it's amazing some of the creation tools that are out there. And I'd like to do a round. Izzy, let's start with you. And I think you've been using creation in some really innovative ways beyond just artwork and photography. How are you creating, or what are you creating using AI for marketing?
So one of the biggest use cases I have for creation is LinkedIn carousels. So it's really interesting because, you know, this goes back to for example, this goes back into you have to humanize your content, right? So you can use ChatGPT to create what would go in the carousel, and then you can kind of automate that whole creation with Canva bulk create feature. But you just have to be really careful that you're not just copy and pasting everything, because it's going to sound robotic and it's not going to be super helpful. People are going to be able to tell. So that's one of the biggest use cases I have for creation. Other use cases can be around, like, you know, courses, emails, landing pages, anything that has to do with like copywriting, really.
A follow-up question, Izzy. I believe on the B2B side, we work with a lot of business-to-business clients, and the whole dynamic there is often moving above advertising to trying to seed content, you know, to publish a lot of thought leadership content upstream. So when the executives you're trying to reach or decision makers make a decision, they can find you. I believe you were doing some work on B2B content with AI. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so like when you're sharing content to kind of nurture your connections. Yeah, so you can use ChatGPT to pretty much, you know, if you have to create like a white paper or like a checklist or any documentation that's going to help you nurture your leads and your connections, it can help you do all of that. It can help you, you know, even to the most minute detail of building the landing page with the automations for them to opt in. So it really just depends on like what your use cases are, but yeah, ebooks, you know, there's even people that are selling books on Amazon that are 100% AI generated. It's really, the
I've heard
possibilities are endless.
publishers are. It's funny, as a side, I have a connection who works in admissions at Dartmouth College, and she says it's not pretty, some of the essays they're getting.
Yeah.
Elisabeth, what are you seeing on the creation side for marketing? Any uses you've seen that are really interesting?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that I've seen and that I've used it for myself is not pure creation, but actually kind of co-creation. So making the generative AI sort of like my buddy along the way. I was working a couple months back on an abstract for an event session, and you know, I had to like make the title a certain number of words, and I had to make the abstract a certain number of words, and it couldn't be over this many characters. And I had been writing it, and I was getting to a point where I was, you know, kind of stuck. I was like, with like, you know, 85 words, and it needs to be 80 words or less, something like that. And so, you know, I went into ChatGPT and I was like, okay, rewrite this abstract for me in 80 words or less. Like, can you find me some other ways to say some of these phrases? And it was great. I think it actually gave me 81 words. So I don't know that it, you know, was totally accurate to the points that we've been making before, but what it did do for me is help me identify some new like sentence constructions and some new phrases that I could use to reduce down some of the things that were in my original idea. So it was sort of going back and forth with it, like you would, you know, with a writer and an editor, to kind of get to a good place with that. So that co-creation piece, I think, has been really helpful.
Fascinating. I'll share too myself. About a month ago, I had one of those weeks in agency life when I had many deliverables to do at the same time. And I had a very important meeting with a client, and we had done ideation for some experiential sort of out of the box media concepts, but I didn't have time to engage a designer whom I love dearly. So I went over to Discord Midjourney and I put in prompts. In the 60 minutes, it gave me about a dozen beautiful pieces of custom illustrations of these experiential ideas. I threw them in the PowerPoint. The client loved it. It was a little scary, which brings me to my question for all of you. Is this going to remove jobs? I think this is probably a question on a few people's minds. If we find ways to use AI to expedite productivity, creation, research, does that replace the need to have as many people, or is this an augmentation that will make people work better, faster?
Do you
So
want
the
to
question,
answer
the
that,
question,
or-
it was Midjourney. Discord Midjourney is the art creation tool. But go ahead, Lee, why don't you jump in? What's your vote, jobs or growth coming out of this in marketing?
I mean, I vote for growth. Like I look at Adobe for one, who is built on the content system and supplying tools for people in that, and they've embraced AI in a lot of the new tools. It's a client they've added about 48 billion in capitalization in the last 90 days because they have so many tools that talk about AI. I just can't think of a utility. Like I didn't think with AI, like we have to choose a side. And I do feel like that's the way this is coming. Like the web wants you to pick a side, AI good, AI bad. I don't remember when FaceTime came out, people being like, people are going to go visit mom less. This is bad for Delta. And it feels like this is what's going on. It's just like, well, these jobs are going to go away. Publishing jobs are going away. Songwriting jobs are going away. And it's just like, I time and again, the economy has shown to itself to be like adaptable to tech and needs.
You raise a good point. I think with any technological evolution, there is a fear. Kevin Kelly talks about this, that in the 1800s, 90% of our US population worked in agriculture and farming. Today it's something like 2 to 3%. But those jobs didn't go away. They turned into other jobs. Now we have accountants and we have other things that didn't exist as much back then. I think the hopeful case is it becomes a way for us all to have our own automated assistant, but we'll do more, better, strategically, perhaps. Well, I want to move to optimization, and I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. Izzy, I want to start with you. Izzy, if you don't follow her on LinkedIn, you should follow all three of these people on LinkedIn. You published a really interesting PDF recently about some of those super cool things you were doing to optimize your own schedule, including prioritizing tasks using AI. Can you share some details on what that was? I thought that was really an interesting approach.
Sure, yes. So if the prompt was pretty much saying to like, act as a project manager and help me prioritize my to-do list. You can put in like any particular thing that you're actually prioritizing. So for example, you can say like prioritize high impact activities or prioritize high income activities. You can choose also like any productivity methodology that you prefer. And then I just asked it to prioritize my to create my to-do list based on like 30 to 45 minute time increments, which it did. And all you had, like, that was the prompt. All you had to do, the variable was just adding the time, like the tasks, all the things you have to do. And if you have other people on your team that can support you. So if you're able to do that, it's going to create, it's pretty much going to create a whole schedule with already delegating to your team members and stuff like that. And that way you can actually, run past your day or fly past your day. And the other thing that you can do with that is you can take it one step further and then ask it, well, what can you help me do from this whole list? And it'll tell you, well, I can help with X, Y, and Z. And then you take it one step further and you say, okay, let's start with, X, and it'll start creating whatever it is that you said. But with that being said, it's just, again, a reminder that it's not necessarily just copy and paste, right? You can't copy and paste because people are going to be able to tell sometimes it's not, good enough. It doesn't sound like you. And it's very, very important that you kind of just think of it as an assistant where they do maybe like 80% of the work. And then it's 20% of you having to actually, shape it and mold it with your own strategic insights and experiences, etc. And that's really, really important. That's really where you become valuable in the workplace,
I think what you're alluding to is an important point, in that I think a lot of people in marketing believe optimization is sort of this computerized ratcheting. You're running a campaign, you want to get the click-through rate from 0.2 to 0.1, and the machine is going to do this magic to dial it in. And that's a piece of this. But you're talking more about sort of strategic prioritization or project management prioritization. And I think that's an interesting application I'd encourage everyone to play around with. You can put in, given a series of 20 things we need to get done in this goal, in what order should we do them? What are the dependencies? What are the watch out risks to look for? And I've played with that in the business planning, and oftentimes the answers will be very obvious, but it may illuminate a few things you haven't thought of, a risk area or something connected to something that really you need to bring the two together. So it's an interesting approach. Elisabeth, optimization. So tell me a little bit about how you're seeing marketers use AI to optimize.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen a bit is, again, it's that augmenting and editing and kind of refining the approach. So I don't do a lot of programmatic type work where you're optimizing like little pieces of data or, optimizing like a larger SEO strategy. So my experience has more been, again, like for the example that I shared earlier, you wanted to rewrite something and optimize what that is. It's really nice to take a piece of content or something that you've written and think about that. Like, I'm going to use an analogy here, but like, it's kind of like your Thanksgiving turkey that you're putting in and you're saying, okay, ChatGPT, now like, give me the turkey sandwich that I'm eating the next morning. Give me the turkey half that I made with eggs. You can use it to sort of very optimized, tweak, the conversations and the inputs that you're giving to it. So another example that is not food related is like, okay, we talked about personas a little bit earlier. So maybe you have a piece of content that is not specifically geared towards any one persona. You can then go back to ChatGPT and say, okay, now rewrite that so that it appeals to an IT leader, rewrite that so that it appeals to a sales rep, rewrite that so it appeals to a VP of marketing. And you can get some good inspiration there to sort of, it's optimized, but also like personalize or pivot things in that way.
And this is a brilliant insight, Elisabeth. Thank you, because in B2B marketing in particular, the need for content so often outstrips the capability of a small marketing team to get all that content done. And what I'm hearing you say is the humans will create the master turkey content, if you will, but this is a mass customization approach to really kind of break through. Is that hard to do? A follow-up question. So I assume the output when it slices and dices is only as good as how you prompt it. How do you create the prompts to make sure you're getting the variations of content creation in the right way?
Yeah, I think it's a journey that I'm on, honestly. So I'm still learning how to use it. But one of the fun hints that someone on the marketing team here that I work with actually gave is you can ask ChatGPT how to best use ChatGPT. So you can say like, tell me about yourself, ChatGPT. How should I prompt you to get, something that I'm looking for? And so you can almost like interviewing it. So that I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, that's amazing. Lee, what are you seeing for optimization? I know that you deal with these huge data sets, and you started talking about this a little bit earlier, but given the amount of data you're trying to optimize to, how do you approach optimization to get the most out of an AI system?
Well, I mean, Izzy said, we have a client who uses LinkedIn all the time, and they're just constantly changing text in the copy. That is a means of what did we do the last 2 days? Let's use chat and AI to develop some new content. And as opposed to something taking a week, they're making modifications all the time. Here, I'll pull up one thing, Ben. I mean, you talked a lot about prompts, so I'll just show you my, this my fancy Excel sheet, and we have it kind of split out by all the channels, the type of campaign, and here's all the questions that usually comes up. And so I was just on one about, where's the one? Like, we're doing a lot on TikTok with hashtags. We're thinking about TikTok as an SEM channel. Well, how do the use of hashtags and ad content affect engagement rates? Like that's a prompt that we are now putting in on analytics for those clients who want to know about that. What type of engagements are doing the best? And we just continue to kind of add to these. So this is all in the menu. And then I've got a TikTok template that we use. And my team is just taking these prompts and just like putting these into the data and being like, you should be doing more hashtags with health content, more hashtags with lifestyle, or hashtags with condition content. And Chat is suggesting that to us. So when you asked about optimization, the prompt is like us developing this, and then the data set, and then the advice.
And in terms of the output, what has been the surprises to you? Is it just about speed, or is it about better pattern recognition, the ability to sort a lot of large data and find a pattern a human might miss?
How the more specific you get, the better the discussion tends to go. And I find that ability to what you pattern and the depth and the detail is able to the speed of which we can do so, and then be like, well, this is really interesting. That seems like something that we can consistently repeat. So all of those things, just how fast we were able to get at quality data and insights that the client is like, wow, that's a cool thing. I can go back and talk. Usually it's agencies I'm talking to. I can go back and talk to my clients about thinking about using TikTok and really taking what we were doing on Google and SEM and other channels and using it in that medium. That's just one example, but that's a common one.
I want to share one more from our audience in the chat. Brian has made a comment that his team is using it for ideation sessions. They prompt the session participants. They pre-create, I believe, 800 AI generated new product ideas. And then they bring it to their team of about 18 people and have the humans springboard the ideation off of the pre-ideas from AI. So if you think about ideation going wide before you go narrow, that's a really fascinating use case as well, I think. Well, I want to move on. We talked a little bit about all the new tools out there. And Lee, you had a good point that you're focusing in on what works now, what plugs in now. But I want to ask each of you, as you think about the year ahead, if you're a marketer and you want to kind of look for the next thing that can really help you, what's the criteria by which you judge out of all these hundreds of tools popping up every day? Elisabeth, let's start with you. How would you pick the ones that look like they have some gold in them?
One of the things that I've seen happen, and I'm seeing it firsthand where I'm working, is that like all of this technology is being built into the tools that we as marketers or marketing adjacent functions are starting to use every day. And so like I know the way Highspot is thinking about it, we are optimizing how we're using generative AI tech specifically for the use cases that our customers have. Tools all across kind of the marketing and sales tech stack are doing that same thing. They're identifying ways to leverage these large language models, this generative AI, and they're kind of productizing that into use cases that are most relevant to their audiences. So if you have tools that you're using on a day-to-day basis, like if they don't have generative AI in them today, first of all, if you're a customer, I would push them to start building out that functionality. But if you look closer at, what they're launching of new capabilities, what they have on their roadmaps, I think you're going to see a lot of generative AI in there. And so those are going to be tailor-made for the use cases that are already relevant to like everyone that's on this call.
So what you're saying is we don't have to go look for the robots. The robots are coming to look for us, basically. But
I think it's a little bit of that, yeah.
But seriously, I think you raised a good point. I'm a photo hobbyist and I use Adobe Lightroom to edit my photos. And they recently have embedded AI in there for augmenting photography. And so I think what you're saying is we need to keep our eyes up and see of the tools we use now. I believe it's in Google Sheets. There's AI components that we can start to experiment with. Izzy, over to you. What are you seeing ahead, and what should marketers look for tools that have utility?
There are way too many tools being created. So I think it's just about finding a couple, like a handful, that can replace your tasks or the things that you're actually trying to accomplish, and like not necessarily getting like super lost in like, you need the next big thing or the next shiny item kind of. For example, if we talk about like video editing, there's like Opus Pro, there's Too Short, there's Get Munch, there's Captions AI, there's like a whole series of tools, but all of those capabilities you can find inside of like Descript, for example. So it's like you can go and test and try all these different tools, but it's just a matter of what are your actual use cases, and just finding one that works and sticking to it. And of course keeping an eye just to make sure that you're still learning and being in the forefront, but you can lose a lot of time. It's like a double-edged sword. You can lose a lot of time trying to be on all the apps.
Well, we have time for about 3 or 4 more questions, and then we'll open it up to a little bit of a Q&A via the chat. I want to get into the fears and the hopes. So let's talk about the fears a little bit. So this all sounds good. We've been talking a lot about pragmatic ways we can use this. What keeps you up at night? I think one of the Q&A participants asked, what are we worried about with AI, in particular to marketing? Lee, anything you're worried about when you think about how we're deploying it and where this is going?
I know this is the point where we say but yeah, I don't have a lot, Ben. The hesitation I see in AI is kind of the same thing I think about social media, is that people should know what's news and what's analysis. Fundamentally, I'm okay with AI obviously assembling facts, and I'm less okay with AI doing analysis. And I think that has to be the dichotomy that people kind of take, which is like, I need to do this to get, I keep saying this, is repeatable tasks faster, more efficient. But at the end, it has to be the human who's like kind of thinking about what does this mean to my team and my brand. And if I'm just saying, hey, machine, I need you to tell me that, that's the analysis piece. That's the piece I don't want.
I think that's a great insight. And I've heard many stories where AI can make completely the wrong analysis because it didn't have the right inputs, and then you go awry. Elisabeth, not to go negative, but let me ask you, what would give you a worry about how this is rolling out, especially in marketing?
Yeah, so in my job function, product marketing, we are really close to like all of the innovation that's coming out on our product roadmap. What is the company strategy? We are deep in a lot of work that is like quite confidential, frankly, and that we don't want, competitive products or competitors to latch onto. So the kind of scary thing that I've seen is a little bit around like accidental disclosure, where folks are using ChatGPT to help them with like the most strategic elements of their business. They might be like, one mistake that I could potentially make that we have a policy against to safeguard, but I could say, okay, well, we have, whiz bang on the roadmap. Whiz bang is for this, and let me have ChatGPT write my announcement blog post on it, or let me have ChatGPT build me my persona strategy, or give me my SEO keywords for that. And then particularly on the more like free generative AI tools, that data is being used to inform and train the system. I've heard of one example, and the name of the company is escaping me, who exactly it was, but they had actually a pre-release product disclosed, and it came out in an answer to someone's prompt on ChatGPT. And so that certainly is a fear that I have, like in particular for my role, and something that, as a company, we've put in some safeguards to protect against.
So before you ask a very smart network a question, make sure you want the question on the very smart network. That's good advice, I think.
Definitely.
And Izzy, tell me about your worry ahead. It can be anything, but when you think about what could go awry, what keeps you up at night?
So this is a really good question, because the first thing that pops to mind is it's more into cybersecurity. I read an article a couple of months ago that it said most passwords, or like AI has the capability to hack like 50% or something like that of passwords in less than 8 seconds. So it's like, that is alarming. It's like 50% of everyone's passwords. That's a lot of information that can the bad actors can actually steal and hack and use. And it goes into like then the deep fakes. There was a scam of this, it was like also all over the news. These scammers voice cloned this whole family. Like they voice cloned like the grandkids in a family, and they called the grandmother, and they used their fake AI voices in the background, and they were like screaming, asking for like a ransom essentially. And it was the whole thing, right? So it's like, in this, now moving into like this new era, it's going to be so challenging. It's so scary almost, trying to figure out what's real and what's fake, because these AI deepfakes are just looking too real.
You're
crazy.
touching on a non-trivial issue, in that the majority of consumers, when you survey them, do not like advertising right now. One of the biggest trends in the marketing industry are consumers trying to avoid advertising by paying for streaming services. And if we lose authenticity as marketers by putting things out there that aren't quite real, we do run a risk of damaging the ecosystem potentially. So it's definitely something to think about. A question from our audience, a good friend of mine, Jim, asks a question. How do you validate, Lee, or anyone on the panel, that these systems aren't hallucinating when they when they answer the prompts? So Lee, let's start with you. When you're doing your optimization, is there ever a worry that the AI may be hallucinating and giving you the wrong answer in some way?
I have a finite usage at the moment, and I think as I look to expand that, but most of it, I'm feeding the data in that I want. Like, it's not going outside the walls that I supply it.
Okay.
Now, if I was to say, how is this doing competitively against somebody else? So I'm in the shallow end of where it's going. So for me, no, but that is a intentional choice, because I'm just using it for a specific use case. I think Izzy or somebody else would have more validity on speaking to that.
Yeah. I think the other side of the answer might be human validation is also important if you use AI for any sort of research, to make sure that you can back up the research that's being given to you. So before we do the Q&A, I'm going to pivot to 2 more questions. Now let's go to the positive side. We've gone negative. Izzy, I want to start with you. What excites you the most? If you think about a year ahead, or even 2 or 3 years ahead, where do you think this is going for marketers? What gets you pumped up?
So this is a really exciting time to be alive, because we are with AI. We are living a time that we can actually like augment our skills. So before, it was maybe like just you, and maybe you're like overworked and burnt out and whatever it is. But with AI, you can actually automate, at least right now, you can automate at least 40% of your workday. So immediately you're going to have, and this is something that I've already experienced as well, because AI is helping so much with all the mundane, all the easier tasks. It has unlocked this whole new level of thinking, because now I have a lot of free space in my brain that I can actually focus on strategic thinking. So instead of being worried about writing an email campaign from scratch, now I'm looking at the email campaign and I'm thinking, how can I improve this and make it better? And it becomes better. So I think in that capability, like, we're all going to become a lot better, a lot more skilled and more strategic, and that's exciting. And also, just really quick to answer the last question, the way to avoid hallucinations is just you just say, do not hallucinate. It's like that simple. Just say, do not hallucinate, and it won't. It'll stay in its lane.
Sort of like AI therapy very rapidly. I like that.
I'll put in the chat the outline of how to write a prompt. I think that might be helpful.
Absolutely. Elisabeth, what keeps you excited when you think about the future? What do you hope will happen, or think will be very good?
Yeah, I would say my answer is pretty similar to Izzy. Just the idea that I can spend less time on the manual tasks, on less time on the, sort of that rote work. I can get started on things faster because I have this like co-creation tool. And therefore I have more time back to spend on deep work and making a strategic impact. That's something I'm really excited about. Another thing too, I manage a team here, and one thing that I'm really excited about is just seeing the energy of the folks that I'm working with around like learning about this tech, starting to adopt it. They are figuring out new use cases that I never ever thought of. And so seeing how it's spurring that like creativity and growth for them as a team is another thing that I personally am just really, really thrilled about.
Well, on that note, I want to get to my last question, and then we'll get into a few Q&As here. So marketers will listen to this, they're excited, they've heard a lot of great use cases. How do they get started? And let's break this into two parts. People have to interact. So how do they train their employees? Who on their teams do they get to start using these tools? So let's talk about people, and then what else do they need to do? What projects should they engage in to get going on AI? Lee, I want to start with you. People and projects that marketers can get rolling on. What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a good question. Last month we had to make a decision. It's like, is this something that we want all of the staff to use? It feels like if you're trying to scale up the whole team and company, you're going to move really slowly. We asked people to volunteer. Who are the 5 people who want to help lean into this? And then we ask them, which is like, what's the things that you feel like are taking your team's time? And from that point, we found a motivated 6 to 10 people who wanted to add AI to their skill set, and found a bunch of campaigns and tasks that the team or things that we had said, this is suboptimal, and began just attacking it that way. So it's amazing what happens when you ask people like, who wants to be involved in this, and then as opposed to making it a mandate.
I love it. Izzy, what would you recommend? A marketer out there is listening to this and wants to get going. What do they do with people or projects in the couple months ahead?
So this is actually I've been doing a lot of corporate workshops, training teams on how to do this, and the biggest thing that I see come up, the first thing is actually making it part of like company culture, like be open about it, talk about it. Some companies, what they're doing is they're actually allowing like time for AI exploration for their team. But really in order to kind of have a little bit of control of like what they're actually what you actually want them to do with it, is to kind of guide them and kind of like break down their day-to-day, figure out what are like the easiest tasks, start with like the easy for like the easy wins. What are like the easiest tasks? Once you like master that, you start moving into like the harder stuff. But you'll notice that like once they start seeing all of these like little tasks get automated and just kind of like fall off their plate, they'll also gain motivation to want to figure it out on their own, because they're going to be so excited that their day is getting so much easier. So yeah, it's just a matter of, having the openness to talk about it and just dive in with the easiest stuff first.
And Elisabeth, we'll give you the final word before we get to the Q&A. What do you think people and projects marketers should engage in to get going?
Yeah. So I would say like leveraging the power of community, and some of my roots are in sort of community marketing. So maybe I'm leaning on that a bit here, but I see a lot of community and enthusiasm naturally emerging, at least, in my company and the folks that I've worked with around this, like just nurture that, give it a space. So we have a dedicated Slack channel for anyone in the company right now to join, to just talk about all this AI innovation that's coming out, ask questions, like be curious. And I see our leaders that are in there, and they're kind of nurturing that conversation, which has spurred, a lot of creativity across the team. I also think, it's going to be clear who your people are on the team that are like excited about this. Their enthusiasm, I think, is very genuine. I've seen folks, be curious about it. And so figure out who those like power users and early adopters are and shine a light on the work that they're doing, hold them up as a great example of, something that you want other folks to dig in, show how they've been successful with. It's almost like using them as an internal, case study, I think can be really helpful.
So there you have it. To wrap up, we recommend that you get volunteers, you make it part of your internal culture, and you engage with your external community. And Izzy promises you will get 40% more productivity. Thank you, Izzy. We appreciate that. So thank you all. We're going to do a quick round of Q&A. This has been an amazing session. So a few questions from our audience. Let's talk about how to do a better job with prompts. Izzy, you started talking about, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, you talked about asking, I believe, how to do a better prompt, but any sort of strategic advice when you engage with the questions, how do you approach it to do a better job? Elizabeth, how would you approach doing a better job with prompts?
Yeah, so I think one of the major unlocks for me in starting to play around with this was going from like a one question prompt to multi-turn prompts, or giving it sort of multiple steps. So Izzy put a great, I think, example in the chat of how you could structure your prompt. So like act as, what you want the chatbot to do, give it some context, ask it, for the specific thing, add the format that it should give you the output in. So I think the more you put details into your prompt, almost like you are writing out an assignment for someone, who might be very junior and has never done that work before, the better the output is likely to be that you're going to get. So, it's like garbage in, garbage out, quality prompt in, more likely to get quality results out.
Thank you. Another question is, two questions actually. What few thought leaders or influencers do you follow to keep up with what's going on? Lee, anyone in the industry you're tracking?
I should have more. I follow Scott Belsky, who's the Adobe CMO. I mean, I listen to the Scott Galloway stuff.
Scott Galloway, Scott always has good insight. Yeah. I personally,
he talked about it from a financial standpoint. I thought the last point, which is like the prompt one, and we say that all the time, act as a data scientist for an ad tech company, act as this, and you'll be amazed at how much that'll tweak the output.
Yeah. Izzy, any thought leaders or influencers that you tend to follow to keep up? Sorry, I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute. No, I was just saying I'm like super immersed in this world, so I do follow a lot of like newsletters, and I'm in a lot of communities. But I think one of the best places, two really good places to start. One of them is Allie K. Miller on LinkedIn. I think she has like over 1 million followers or something, but super knowledgeable, always sharing like the latest that's happening in AI and in technology. The other place, I think it's learnprompting.org. I'll find the link. I'll put it here in the chat in a second.
Oh, fantastic.
But learnprompting.org, I believe it is. And it is a free resource where you can actually get better at prompt engineering.
I love it. My friend Pam wrote, I follow Ben. Pam, you're in trouble. Do not follow me. No. Hey, and just a couple other questions from Joe. Do the AI platforms own and action the prompts and data that we enter? So I actually don't know the answer, any of you, but if I upload a table for a query, am I giving up any ownership on that? Any concerns?
So actually it said OpenAI says it's very like gray area because they say it's for research purposes, but they're not like firm. There's no transparency on what's actually on your privacy. And this is part of the things that that they're talking about even with Congress, of like the privacies and the policies and the ethics and all of that. Because this technology, as amazing as it is, it still has flaws. It's a biased algorithm. There's lack of privacy. So even OpenAI, you can check in like their footnotes. They'll have like the latest updates underneath the chatbot. But yeah, even they are not very clear on that information yet.
And I'll take the last question and then I'll invite our president back. The last question is from Osvaldo. Is digital marketing still a good and safe degree to pursue? And my answer is absolutely. It's crazy, it's changing, and it's exciting. And so my vote is I'm optimistic, and I think AI is going to help empower our digital jobs of the future. So I want to thank everyone for a virtual round of applause. Izzy, amazing, Izzy Bedoya. She is a true thought leader in the space. Elizabeth, you're getting it done over at Highspot. So thank you for joining. And Lee Baler, a good friend of mine at Strike Social, a very amazing company. Lee, glad you're here. So thank you all for playing. And I'm going to turn it back to Dan Liu, our chapter president.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, panel, for an incredibly informative session. I knew very, very little about ChatGPT and generative AI before. I'm still certainly a novice, but I certainly know a lot more. And everybody who's attended, appreciate you coming onto the virtual event. And we're going to be having a lot more activities, both virtual as well as in person for the chapter. Later this summer, we're going to be having a big networking get-together that's bringing together our newly consolidated Connecticut chapter group. So hopefully you can join that if you're in the area. And thank you everybody for spending time tonight. We appreciate the time that you spend. And we know we've got a lot of things to do and other possible activities, and having you share it with us really means a lot. So we appreciate that. So thank you everyone. Have a great night and have a wonderful 4th of July weekend.